guys, welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Therapists. Today we are thrilled to chat with Madeline, is it Madeline or Madeline? I'm so sorry.
Madeleine. It's okay.
Madeleine Zimmerman, and she's an LCSW and the founder of Kinship Care Therapy. Madeleine specializes in working with trauma, addiction, complex family dynamics, a lot of stuff, and then also has a bunch of evidence-based and trauma-informed approaches. Sorry, that was a mouthful there. Madeleine, your work is so cool, and your website's cool, and you're cool, and I'm just really excited to talk to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today.
Good, I'm glad. Okay, so beyond your private practice, you focus on creating an affirming space for the LGBTQIA community, clients, their families, navigating maybe those transitions, along with other difficult family transitions. And I think that that's so cool. So I want to talk more about that. But before we kind of get into that, I want to talk about your name of your company, Kinship Care and Therapy, and how you came up with that instead of just using your name as your business. So how did that come about?
Yeah, honestly, at the time, it was really trying to figure out a name that worked and felt right for me, and that was hard. While nonetheless, a lot of folks suggested not to overthink it as it's something you can like rebrand down the road. But I learned about the word kinship during one of my first jobs coming out and being in the LA area. And I just really felt like encompassed the work and what I was looking to create, which was providing care as a kin. So being a kin member, whether that is family, whether that's community, to me, kinship just meant so much more. When I understood kinship, I understand it as not just like blood family. It's just caregivers or those that look out after one another. And that just seemed like a beautiful way to kind of encapsulate the work that I'm doing and plan to continue to do.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. So we worked on Madeleine's site for anybody who doesn't know that. But when I first started doing it, I was like, I wonder if she got this from like some sort of adoption thing, but that's only because my best friend went through like an entire like fostering adoption system. So it's like, I've never thought, oh, kinship doesn't necessarily mean like, that relationship. So that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
what brought you to Los Angeles and into this therapy field?
Yeah, well, I went to undergrad in St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri. I had the most amazing mentor. He passed away unexpectedly. Man, it's been probably almost 6, 7 years at this point. But
Wow.
nonetheless, we were doing work together. I never thought I'd go into social work. If you asked me my freshman year of college, I was like, absolutely not. Then I did the work and I was doing the work. And by my senior year, I was a criminology, criminal justice major. I realized following authority or like kind of like following orders just was not my vibe, which I don't know how I thought that was for anyone that's listening that knows me. Pretty goofy, but nonetheless, I was like, okay, social work is it. And it was really deciding if I was going to stay in St. Louis or go and leave and be in Southern California. And my mentor at the time just really encouraged me and just kind of gave me the insight that the way I saw the world from a macro perspective, he just was like, if you stay here, you're probably going to stay forever, and that's great. While if you go to LA, you'll see this is so much bigger and so much more than just in this city. It's happening everywhere. And I think your lens would really appreciate that. And so I took a leap and I had never been to LA and decided to move out there and did it. Yeah. And so came out and get my master's in social work.
So you graduated with
Criminology,
criminology?
criminal justice, and a minor in poli-sci.
Cool. What was the original plan with that?
To be an FBI agent.
Okay, so you could have done your like psychology stuff too and been a profiler, but then you would have known all about the worst people in the world.
And that was like all of my primary core classes. Like it was really intense and wild and interesting. Do not get me wrong. I think I got to a place where I really started being a lot more passionate about preventative work and how to really come from a community within and provide support and services and care.
Yeah.
And not to say FBI doesn't do that, but also like very, very different. And it seems a little bit more on the side of like law enforcement, reactive, like kind of
there has to be the tragedy for them.
Yeah, right. Something bad happens, then you respond. And so I just kind of wanted to take a very, very different approach. I started a nonprofit with other colleagues, definitely not just my own peers in college. And that was providing after school programming, and we were applying for grants. And
is this still in St. Louis or?
Yeah. Yeah, that was in St. Louis. We were just college students and kind of trying to figure out and meet the needs. And everyone's like, yeah, that's social work. And I was like, okay, then I guess I'll
It means
go.
more than just visiting people in their homes and
Yes, like way more than just DCFS or CPS or what you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I personally know some of that because my mom is an LCSW, but like,
Amazing.
yeah, she was like, "Oh no, it's more than just going into people's homes." Because I think I was probably 14 when I was asking those questions, even though that had been her job for my whole life. Um,
Totally.
but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like it's so weird. That's the only like thing people focus on with LCSWs.
Yeah.
That's not
And
accurate.
there's so much more. I mean, my focus, even in my graduate program, was policy change, social change, and innovation. I came out of grad school. I was working in development as a grant writer full time for a community organization. And I was being pulled for some mental health support if they needed to do risk assessments or grief support or things like that. And I just found more I was doing that work. I was like, wait, I'm really missing working with the people.
People and not
So
writing grants.
yeah, which so important and is a must, but just needed to make a little bit of a transition.
Yeah, that's so cool. So, okay, did you get your graduate degree in St. Louis or did you move to California and get that?
Came out to California, went to University of Southern California and got my master's in social work there.
That's
And how
fun.
long have you been in Los Angeles?
8, 9 years, I believe.
Wow, you are in it. Like, that's your
Yep.
city now. Wow.
Did you grow up in St. Louis?
No, I am from Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay, wow, all right.
Hey, all my in-laws are there.
Hey, yep. I just like moved to a little, I remember going to St. Louis being like, this is such a big city. And then I went to LA and I was like, oh my gosh, nothing in
Like there's many
comparison.
big cities crammed into one.
Exactly.
It is wild. My sister and her daughter live in LA, and she's like, "Yeah, we don't really leave our bubble." And I'm like, "What does that
Mm-mm.
mean?" She's like, like everything I need is within this amount of time for me, so like I don't have to get on those interstates for hours." I was like,
When we talk to other therapists, they're usually starting their private practices kind of in the city they've been at. They kind of have an idea. They've worked in maybe group practices before. This actually sounds incredibly overwhelming,
yeah, you're
the
like, "I'm new to
environment
this.
that you're
This is
now
really
in.
cool. I'm gonna start my own practice. I
Yep.
got this."
I seem to just thrive or look for change and overwhelm a little bit in my life. Definitely
Love
since
that.
opening my own private practice. It was a year in actually February 19th last year when I started it.
Congratulations.
And it is probably the most consistent and not chaotic thing I've been doing in the sense of like seeking that overwhelm or whatnot. It's probably the best thing I've ever done for myself. And I never would have thought I would be doing this today, but could not
Yeah.
be happier.
Okay.
Love that idea of seeking overwhelm. Melissa, I might have to steal that phrase for myself.
Yeah,
I like it.
it's cute until it's not sometimes.
Until you're business partners with somebody and they're texting you at 10 p.m. about changing stuff on something, and I'm like, shh, let's just
And
close.
sending you amazing reels. So what was the process like of actually like finding the right clients, finding the right people to work with,
Yeah,
especially if you're coming from so many different
Yeah,
were
it's
you doing
trains
that?
of thought?
Were you doing that with your group practice before you were started your private practice, or did you kind of like big shift?
Yeah, no, I was kind of in this focus. I think, of course, going into and starting my own private practice, it really held my feet to the fire where I'm like, okay, I have to make a website. Like, I have to say, like, what I do, which was a little intimidating. While I will say, in my prior group practice, my supervisor and management there did such a good job at really trying to support and figuring out really what your niche was.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's cool.
That
That's kind
is.
of rare too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And it was almost like if you don't try it, how do you know? So I definitely started there and very broad. It was, trying to kind of figure out. But I was in homeless services and just community care prior to the group private practice. And so I kind of had the idea. I'd been doing the work. By the time I came to them, I mean, at this point, informally 13 years into this, being a therapist is what, right?
I have no
So,
idea, dude.
it's
It's
taken
a
some
long
time to
journey.
get there. But yeah, it's been like It's funny because when thinking about trauma, addiction, family dynamics, or like codependency, it feels like we're reaching at all these things. But when learning about them all, like, and really from like foundational to how you are, it all makes sense. Like where we come from when we're young, our caregivers, how we're cared for by people in our community or our families or whatever that may be, all the way to then kind of when we start figuring out how to cope and manage with our feelings and emotions, and that's usually where some of the addiction or even just like maladaptive behaviors, being like any unhelpful behavior, right? We're seeing like doom scrolling and
Oh my gosh.
even just
So
like
easy.
risky behaviors, like I'm not going to wear my seatbelt ever. We could think about kind of risky behaviors in so many ways, and I'd frame it under addiction, but when working with me and depending on who's coming in, like it's really just these behaviors that are no longer serving you, and at one point we're protecting, and at this point just kind of outgrowing them.
Hmm.
And yeah, like childhood all the way to addiction, depending on your use, depending on your relationship, like trauma can come into play with that, and it all just kind of seemed to connect well. So as when I started to try to sell it more as if like this is everything I do, it felt overwhelming.
Yeah.
But more I felt like I stayed true to like what those three kind of areas were, clients come. And that was one of the best things I learned from my last practice, was like they will come. And the more you also refer out to your colleagues in the field who do that work, they will come back to you as well. And I trust that with my whole heart. And that really is the sauce in so many ways, is like making room for those clients that really work for you and really referring out. For example, I have a great colleague in the field that works primarily with women, and I'm a woman. I work in LGBTQIA. I'm a queer woman myself. Like it would be so easy for me to be like, yeah, like women's issues, duh. But if someone's coming in and saying, like, I want to work on my identity with being a woman, what better way is it to give a connection to over there? And yeah, it's also ultimately up to the client to choose. But at the very
Yeah.
least, I'm saying, like, this could be a really good fit. I know a colleague. Of course, I can do this work. While, like, why don't you just go chat with this person and see what you think?
Yeah. I think
And I just think
and
doing
that's
that more
super nice.
helps.
Like I don't think a lot of therapists, it's generalizing. I have not come across a personal therapist that's been like, why don't you try this person and this, because maybe that's not their strong suit. I mean, it's kind of like I can do it, but why if somebody else can do it better? And then
Absolutely.
that's like a positive pass. Like instead of they're leaving because they're a disgruntled person because they've not gotten anything out of it or something, or not gotten the most out of
Absolutely.
it. I think that's
Absolutely.
really
And what
cool.
a beautiful way to also like start building empowerment within your client and self-esteem just from the get. When you're really saying like, hey, this is your process, not mine. And I can see this. I know we might be vibing via the call or whatever, but like there are other therapists out there that can be just as great or even better because you're looking for something in particular that someone else can just give you even a little bit better. And that's okay to
Yeah.
say as a therapist, because that's how we also work with the people that work best with us.
All right. So you're talking
Yeah,
about
I
this
think one of my
referral work. Sorry.
I think one of my own mentors had said, don't ever, if you don't know the answer to the question, don't act like you do. It's a lot better to say, why or what is that, and actually build up your trust that way so that when you actually say something that is knowledgeable, they're like, you do know what you're saying because I already trust that you will tell me if you don't. Like, I think it kind of goes the same way, huh?
Love, absolutely. I mean, I always tell other therapists one of my favorite things to do is be able to tell them when I'm wrong, or like when I say something that maybe didn't hit the right way, like kind of that fray in that relationship or an opportunity to like rebuild. That seems like when I bring that level of authenticity, because that's what we're kind of asking of our clients, that takes the wall down for them to also feel that same authenticity, or at least the ability to try that authenticity out,
Yeah.
which is
I
so
think
cool.
that's I think that's cool. Okay, so you talked about referrals and how that works. How are you connecting with other colleagues? Like, do you go out and like do networking stuff? Like,
No.
that's a whole different.
I do not like networking events, and that's okay. Like, there's some people that do them really well and also really
Yeah.
enjoy them. Pardon
I
me.
we have kind of figured out that local networking for us is fun to do as like fun and like
That
adult.
Get out of the house.
It's great to get out of the house. Great
Yeah,
to
but it's
have some
not
fun.
like that's not our bread and butter, like for clientele. It's just kind of like
I'll
adult.
tell you what, though, when you're not trying to sell yourself at networking events, they're so fun. Like they're way more fun
Well,
than when
that's what
you
I
like
was
have to
gonna.
pass out business cards.
Yeah, no shame in going to one. I mean, depending, you can get some really good ones. Some of the psychiatry ones, man, they'll have like free food or whatever. Like, grab another therapist friend and go and hang out. But in terms of like true networking and bringing clients in, honestly, colleagues in the field have been like one of my greatest. And surprisingly, it's been even using platforms like Psychology Today, which I know can be
Hmm.
so hit or miss for people, or Inclusive Therapists, or Mental Health Matters, or Therapy Den, you name it. If I know of it, I probably have tried to get on it somehow just to have that visibility. But yeah, I also just I don't know. I don't know.
But when you're going on these like professional platforms, are you just like scrolling and then like reading, okay, that person looks like they'll do this and then referring, or are you kind of contacting them first and talking
I see
about?
what you're asking. So you're asking when I refer out. So that's actually been one of my biggest goals this year, especially in harm reduction work and working in addiction, having that little bit of niche. It's been really important for me to find really good resources and referrals for that specifically.
Yeah.
Especially as like in network versus out of network or other people that have sliding scale spots open. I've been very lucky to be able to find a couple organizations, associations that are around harm reduction.
Okay.
California harm reduction therapists. That has been really awesome. We get together once a month and we actually consult with one another.
Look at you. So you are networking.
Yeah, very
Yeah, I
cool.
guess I kind of didn't think about that. But then on the other end, like outside of harm reduction, honestly, being a part of that group practice was really helpful to be able
Yeah.
to build some other therapists that have different niches and whatnot. As well as just asking your therapist friends, like, hey, you may not be this, but do you have someone?
Yeah.
So I guess it is a lot of just like networking one to one in that way, or kind of nourishing those like therapist colleague relationships to find other referrals. But on like the larger end, like psychiatry or services that are outside of being like a therapist, talk therapy or EMDR or whatnot, that is definitely like reaching out, cold calling, just saying like, hey, would love to get on a call, which most people are actually really excited to.
Yeah, I would totally see that like therapist to therapist reach out being more not reliable. I don't know the word I'm trying like that they know most likely that's not a spam call. Whereas like, you know,
Correct.
like somebody just cold emailing or whatever because like, hey, I need therapy. There's so much that could be like this could be totally a scam. It could be real. I need more. But like I could see that therapy to therapy thing being a better connection, I think. Yeah. But anyways,
No, for sure. I mean, as a social worker, it kind of feels like that's like where my brain goes to is like I can't leave anyone without referrals. Not to say, never, always, or absolutes, but it is really nice or helpful. And I can tell clients or potential clients really appreciate it. When you're just like, hey, you're looking for a network, I have someone that would be great for you. Like, it's hard to find a therapist out there. It's hard to find the right fit. It's like
there's so
dating, it's
many. There's so
matchmaking.
many.
There's so many.
Yeah.
There's, all different types of people. And so it just feels like when people are going through a hard time and they're reaching out and it's not a good fit and they just shared their like whole story with you, like in my mind, it doesn't mean it's the way to be, but it's the least that I could do is just like offer that one next step and stepping stone because it takes so much courage and energy to reach out and go through this process as is.
Okay, so I know Jennifer's going to ask you about your niche in just a second, but
Sure.
before we get to that, we were talking before the call about sorority rushing, and I, you have 5 times in this thing that I've been like, I wonder if she learned that from like you just kind of like during that process. I mean, it's 4 years of these intense, very quick conversations where you kind of get a read on somebody really quickly. So like, do you feel like when you're having a client that maybe you're like I don't know if this is going to be a fit immediately because I may not be able to help you. Do you feel like that's something you can find faster? Like, and then be able to know, okay, I'm referring them to this person or they'll be a good fit with this person. Like, Do you feel like that's helped you? Did I just make a
Yes.
connection for you?
No, I mean for sure. It all is helpful, right? Like going through recruitment, you're learning how to talk to people that are going to be a match and not a match, and you know that going into it. And
Mhm.
that's okay. Like doesn't mean that they're bad people, I'm bad, neither way. Like we can still have a really wonderful conversation. Um it's it's gotten easier over time as like anything does, you
Yeah.
know. I definitely, when I first started looking for clients or clients looking for me and taking on someone and being like, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't a great fit. And, you know, by first session, I definitely feel like I've been able to say, come back to second session and be like, we did the intake, like based on what you're needing, you know, I can focus on this, but it seems like this is really the focus. And if that's the case, like I'd love for you to chat with someone else. Now I feel like I can suss it out through the intro free consultation call that I offer. But that's honestly not because I don't think I could tell at the time. It was more so at the time there's this feeling as you're trying to figure out who you want to work with, what you want to do, you're collecting hours, you start to kind of make reasons in your head of like how it could be a fit. And like, sure, there were loose fits that still worked out, or ended up being great fits, or we still were able to do great work together. But on the other end, with time, I just have gotten a lot more confident with my gut of just like, yeah, like just refer out. Like thinking about it as one of your few spots, there are people you see every week. It doesn't, again, mean I don't like someone, but it's just like, is this really the best place for me and really the client who is ultimately making a financial investment in something? And
Yeah.
that's what I
And
just take really
it's
seriously.
they need to get the benefit out of it. Like I know
Yeah,
that you
totally.
need to get paid, but at the same time, like,
Exactly. But it's
yeah,
for the client, not myself. Like,
right.
which is comes down to our code of ethics and social work. And I think it can the money part can get confusing because of course you want to be able to pay your bills and all the things, but at the end of the day, like you're right, this is client-centered work, and at any moment you start doing it for yourself or making a decision based on your own need or want, that's when things just tend to get sticky. And I even notice it pretty quickly that just didn't feel good. And so it was a shift that I just made based on comfortability and coming to terms with my own practice and process and therapy.
Yeah.
Okay, so kicking it back to your practice, I love all of that. I'd love to hear more about your actual approach when talking to your clients. On your website, you say that your approach is grounded and action oriented. Can you kind of walk us through what that looks like for you?
Honestly, it's like this, right? It's just talking to me. It's bringing my human side to me, all of me. I'm not a blank slate. I'm not going to pretend to be. If you're someone that, doesn't want politics or feelings or things involved, I'm probably not going to be the right fit for you. I'm definitely very bold in who I am, and I want people that are okay with that. And likewise, mutual respect is important. But when it comes to grounded and action oriented, I just think about that's who I am, being very authentic, being who I am. Again, that kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, where we're asking clients to be so vulnerable. And it doesn't mean I'm bringing my stuff into this sessions. Like, no,
Right.
of course not. But, can I be honest? Can I apologize? Can I take accountability if I say something that didn't land, or if I'm noticing body language changing? Can I check in? Just really mirroring that relational experience.
Mhm.
And then action oriented, I don't know, that's just who I am. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be like you say, problem, like, let's solve it. But, I
Yeah.
definitely think a lot of the clients who come to me have a little bit of that like solution oriented mindset, tend
You're
to
not
be
going to do a
very
lot of waffling about stuff.
no, tend to be pretty motivated. Do tend to work with like good amount of high achievers, perfectionism, so action oriented also feels very soothing to them, as well as myself, no doubt.
Yeah,
But I think
100%.
that just is part of it. And how it shows up is really just being able to have like a walkable, having an action step to walk away with.
Yeah.
It could be as small as drinking a glass of water after session. A very common question is like, what's one way you can show up for yourself today? And at first, clients who start working with me, they're like, "Oh, Jesus, like, what are you asking me?" But as you get to know me and how I work, like, again, it's as simple as having a glass of water. It's going and sitting in the sun for 5 minutes. Maybe it's going grocery shopping. Maybe it's picking up groceries that you got a pickup order ready to go so you don't have to go in the store, but you still get out of the house. Like, how can we meet our client with where they're at and create these small wins that really do affect self-esteem and self-worth and build that confidence within yourself to be able to meet larger goals?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I know that like it's so easy to think, oh, they're going to give me this big, massive goal of like, okay, I'm going to use my own experience. Like, I have this super severe fear of vomiting with,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to vomit, but like it's digressed through my life as now like, I mean, I have two little kids that like it's like that. This
They're
is like a
vomiters.
trend that's happening on social media right now where it's like I have to convince my nervous system that I'm not being chased by a serial killer or a
Oh, I
bear,
love that one.
that it's just like somebody coughing or making a gross noise. And I'm like, that is so true. But I think it's because like there are so many little tiny shifts that have happened over so many years that now I'm like working on untying those shifts. But sometimes they seem dumb. You're not exposing me to the problem immediately in therapy. It's more just like, okay, we'll just take a deep breath if that happens and see how you feel after that. Or, whatever it is
Absolutely.
that is so
Absolutely.
tiny that you're like, it's almost too small. Like, I need bigger, but then you start to do it.
But then we create these big goals like, gosh, like New Year's resolutions, or how often we come into therapy and it's like, I want to be doing this, waking up at 6 o'clock and getting to the gym by 6:30. But people are like not waking up till 9, haven't been to the gym in 2 years. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
And it's like, let's be transparent about the first goal isn't going and getting up every single day and going to the gym. Maybe that's long, long term, but also maybe there's work that coincides with like building up to bigger goals while also breaking down some of the expectations we hold ourselves that we think we have to be achieving to be able to like be worthy or matter. And so there's a little bit of the behavior and the thoughts that are being addressed in that, but you're absolutely correct where it's like the small things are the things that build up and over time really make that instrumental change.
Yeah. But again, I think it's so easy for people to focus on like that big monumental
Totally. We
crisis
all love a
point.
good milestone or big,
Yeah.
How do you help your clients like define success for themselves? You say you work with the high achieving women. I'm sure they don't think like drinking a glass of water is like
They're like, no,
a
that's,
win for the day. But like how like yeah, they are struggling with their we've heard it from other therapists too. They're struggling with the amount of what they do in a day is tied to their self-worth. So like how can they still chase that high of success if like what was the overwhelm statement like you had?
But yeah, like searching for overwhelm.
Yeah,
yeah.
Gosh,
how do they define it for themselves, especially ones that are also battling addictive thinking, substance addiction, like all of that?
Yeah.
yeah, good question. It differs for everyone, definitely, for sure. Wow, first question is like, you're coming here wanting something different. So like, why, we can't keep cramming in the same equation and expecting a different outcome. So like
Right.
having to first kind of get comfortable with the fact that like we are going to try some things differently, and that doesn't mean you can't high achieve. We can already trust that our systems, our bodies, the way you are created to be a high achiever, like you're going to do it. Like my favorite thing to reference is like for people who high achieve with work is like you're not worried about getting that done. In fact, that's always what gets done. It's all the other things that aren't getting done as an effect of solely focusing on work. So if we're shifting a tiny bit to like, I'm going to not look at my phone for 5 minutes in the morning, but when my alarm clock goes off, you're going to still get the work done because you are
Mm-hmm.
this far in your career. You are this far along. So part of it is like actually coming and building some of that self-trust or reminding yourself of that trust that you have in
Mm-hmm.
yourself that has gotten you thus far, and leveraging that as a way to allow people almost the like invitation to make something else a priority, just even for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hard, especially if you're somebody
So
who's,
hard. So
hey,
hard.
hey,
But
I
again,
don't have
that's
that
why.
time.
Right. But again, that's why it's like I'm not going to come into the first session and say, yeah, so like make sure you close your laptop at 7 o'clock every
You
night.
have
Like,
2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night where you
yeah,
can't do any
no
work.
way. But
Crazy.
like, can you do it while you brush your teeth and be mindful then? Like
Yeah.
these
Just be in
things
the
can
present while
be,
you brush your
yeah, like
teeth.
we don't need to make therapy skills so instrumental or like so big and like
Yeah.
we need to take time aside. Like mindfulness can be done during any activity because we
Hmm.
can be mindful doing whatever said activity it is. So how can us as therapists as well get more creative in how we're bringing therapeutic approaches to the table when especially working with like busy lives, which so many ways, who's not busy, but especially when we're talking to, you know, lawyers, people, people with kids and, jobs, people with kids, jobs and extracurriculars. Like there's so many
Hmm.
different layers to day-to-day life. And then on top of it, bringing in like addiction or substance use, right? Like it's all about the small manageable steps.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of, I think, once you start to realize like, oh, that was manageable, I did it. Then I think, what you talked about earlier, it builds that confidence. Like, step by step, you're building that confidence.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago, I have a client who's working on decreasing their alcohol consumption, and they've been doing really great. And I asked if they were ready to kind of take it up a notch, and they first were like, "I think I'm good. Like I have a lot going on in life. Like I don't know. That sounds
Good. I did.
too much." And I was like, "Okay, okay." So that was overwhelming. What's a small, tiny thing that doesn't seem so overwhelming? Oh, well, I could just do like one less glass of wine on Tuesday. Well, that's forward. And I was like,
Totally
cool, let's
manageable,
do it.
but
And I was like,
that's a
that
big
feels good to
step.
you? They were like, yeah, that's so manageable. I was like, so interesting that we went from like absolutely not manageable, we can't go up a step, but then we like break down what that could look like. And now we're totally bought in and we're like, that step's easy. So
Yeah.
sometimes also the way our brain is thinking of what like turning it up a notch would sound like or feel like, and then actually breaking it down and realizing it's something so doable is really helpful.
Okay, so I want to talk more about your niche. What does your roster of clients kind of look like right now? Like what part of your therapy are you seeing more of or the most of that maybe you weren't sure that was what was going to be the big heavy hitter, or maybe what are you seeing? Who are you seeing, kind of a thing?
Yeah, I would say the biggest it is a lot of alcohol use, and that is within a range of like people that just kind of want to change their habits, curious, maybe sober curious, then all the way to like abstinence or working on abstinence, wanting to maintain abstinence, moderation, everything in between. So I'd say that's a really big portion.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Because
the other
like
portion is relationships.
addiction, you don't think like, I don't know. Some people I think addiction is like what the TV and movies make it out to be,
Hmm.
but it's really like what you're talking about is more just I've turned to this substance as my decompression or my coping mechanism, and maybe that's not ideal, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, it comes from my background being born and raised in Wisconsin, number one binge drinking state in the country.
I did not know that.
Yeah, UW, I might be fighting for number two at this point, but it's up there. UW-Madison is always like top party school in the nation. Being from Madison,
I mean,
Wisconsin,
somebody's got to hold the records for something.
right? And at least in this case, it's really helping my case of the work that I'm doing. But it really goes down to the fact that like I grew up in an alcohol forward community.
Yeah.
What you do, everything has alcohol combined to it. Good day, bad day, everything in between. There's always an event, always have beer at it, whatever. It was just a very, very alcohol centric experience. And that definitely influenced me in not all positive ways at all. And I had to really adjust and take a look in the mirror of my own relationship with alcohol. I still consume while nonetheless like extremely much more aware, and definitely engage in moderation and things like that. But I think having that side of things and that understanding helped it be much more approachable. Still playing with the language. I don't love just framing it as addiction because it's so much more than that. But I've also learned that there's a difference of like how I see it and how the viewer or just like common person sees it and what people are looking for. I think addiction gets thrown out a lot, like maybe I'm addicted to this or maybe my
Well, and it can be kind of like a harmful term.
right,
Like,
it kind of
Hmm.
can be deterring, but then also it's kind of this catch-all that everyone seems to be aware of. And
yeah,
so I've still been using it, but also trying to work on getting away from it because I would love
Yeah.
to just be like alcohol use, but that's I'm playing with it. We're working through it, but definitely finding that that word, I guess, at this point in this very time has kind of been the word that is also like the thing you check on the boxes if you're on Psychology Today and you're a potential client looking for a therapist. Like
Hmm.
trying to find language that's translating across the board versus like, well, I know that this is the word or whatnot, but that doesn't always translate to an everyday person. And I think that
Yeah.
even goes back to like my style in therapy is just like bringing that human approach. And it doesn't always have to be so clinical or using this psychological term or, we're getting in such a time where we're becoming, call it in the therapy world sometimes like TikTok brain, where it's like gaslight and narcissist and this and that. And not to say these things aren't happening, and God, we love awareness and everything, while I think in certain ways that can also lose the power of some of these words, and just
Yeah.
constantly playing with diction, which obviously goes to marketing, the work that you all do, but it's hard and trying to figure that out, and sometimes having to be like, I don't like this word, but that's what's landing for people,
Yeah, it is.
and playing between that line.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That.
a tough one, but when you find that word, just let us know.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know that was kind of tangential of what we were speaking on originally,
I
but
like it.
No, I like it. I mean, I think that obviously we do marketing but we work with
right.
therapists, and like that's been amazing that's a side note, but like that's been amazing to just see there's so many different avenues. I don't know that we've talked to someone that does the exact same avenue as anybody else that we've worked with or talked to. Like it's all very different.
No, and the wording matters. Like we were talking to a therapist just before this call who she does neurodivergency, and like she's ranking on Google for social skills classes, but she's like, but I don't do classes. Like that's not what it is. It's social skills, therapeutic, whatever, whatever, whatever. And she's like, I need a
Hmm.
new phrase. Like, what is the phrase? And we're like, I don't know, but we'll find
We got to
something.
figure it
Yeah.
out. But right now, that's
Right. In
not
the
it.
meantime, how do we leverage social skills classes to get to your page and have someone reach out
Right.
to you? Right.
Because people are searching for social skills classes and they're finding you. So, what can we do
Right.
at that point? Convince them that maybe they might need the therapeutic approach other than social skills, like address it,
Right.
be
Right.
aware of it. But in the meantime, individualizing it for your own like practice, yeah, that's way more interesting than just being a Me Too brand.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think that's cool. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about kind of who you're working with. It sounds a lot of you've kind of honed in, which is really cool and amazing. But you also, I know because I designed your site and I read all of your content. You have like a bazillion different modalities that you use. So I want to just before we kind of wrap it up, just talk about like, and it's not just you that's doing it. I mean, you have probably the
Totally.
most we've seen, which is really cool. It means you like to learn, but it also like the more we've talked, people just like to kind of mix them. Like you can't fully mix EMDR, but you can overlap like maybe CBT and trauma informed. Like you can kind of find,
ADP, EFT, like.
yeah, you can find your thing.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about those. How do you integrate those modalities?
It's humans, man. Like sometimes it's the behaviors that are catching us up. Sometimes it's the thoughts. Sometimes it's the big feelings that are hard to regulate. And so the more I have been able to have these different modalities, like you're saying, you pull from them and create this conglomeration of, treatment that tends to work for clients. And
Yeah.
honestly, hot take, I really don't care about any of these certifications that I have, but the community in the world does, and that's okay because there's a lot of weird people doing weird things, and you want to make sure they're legitimate or professional. We live in a world where, we look to merit to make sure that, you're hitting me up and you've never seen me, and then you're going to get on the phone and like tell me some of your deepest, darkest, scariest things. Like fair, you want to make sure I'm certified. Like I respect that. On
Yeah.
my end, it's just not something where I'm like, I'm certified. Oh, but again, it goes back to marketing. How do I leverage these things that matter to other people to connect with them so that they can find me and reach out? But I have found that it just like legitimizes the work. Of course, these certifications are important because then it says you're trained in them, but it really for me is to be able to access more tools, more skills, and feel confident that I'm also knowing what I'm doing when I am mixing and matching and I am pulling from this and pulling from that. But the more therapy can be, at least in my opinion, for people that come to see me, the more therapy The more that therapy is not as like therapeutic forward, I mean, I just had a client recently. It was like I pulled out a tool and it was like very straightforward therapy tool. She looked at me and she goes, "When was the last time you really made it feel like therapy in here? You usually are like weaving things in and we're talking about what we're talking about and learning and this and that, and like you got real therapists just up front with me."
Yeah, no.
Like,
Yeah.
usually I need to, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes you do, and there's of course nothing wrong with that because we are doing therapy. There's no lie or joke
You
around
are
that.
in therapy. I know you
But
forgot.
yes, I know, crazy. I'm gonna ask you what your feeling is. But yeah, I mean, it's helped me feel more confident, and clients seem to enjoy it as we all are dynamic people and need a little bit of everything
Yeah,
sometimes.
I mean, it's what you said. People are complex, and you can't do the same equation for every person.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to wrap it up with one final question about your overall goals for your practice, for yourself. Like, what are you working on this year? What future plans do you have? And if you want to share, what's that look
No,
like?
I love it. I'm kind of in the space where I'm figuring out kind of the next certification or training that I do want to go
It don't
after.
matter, but I still
I
want
know
one.
it doesn't matter, but got to make sure you know what's up. I think one of my big goals for this year was really nurturing my harm reduction community amongst therapists and just
Mhm.
the greater area. And so that's going to be a really big focus this year. And then last year I did do this group. I did like a sober, curious moderation group through the holiday season
Yeah.
from Thanksgiving through like the new year. And that was really cool. And I ended up kind of making a workbook about it. So maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it'll happen this year or next, but I definitely feel like some sort of publication at some point. And maybe I'm speaking on here to hold my
You
future
can do
self
it.
accountable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm
We'll send
at.
you an
We'll see
email
though.
and we'll follow it up with an email in 3 months. Hey, you ready to publicize your workbook? Let's
You guys
do
do stuff
it.
like that too? Like, let me
Oh
know.
yeah, we help with all that. You want to create a course? We got you.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
we'll
Wow.
talk.
Well, go to TME Brand Marketing for all of your marketing needs outside of websites.
You're the
Good
most amazing
therapist.
guest ever.
Okay, well, Madeline, we got to wrap it up because otherwise we'll
Thank
just
you
talk
so
to you forever,
much.
which is not a bad thing, but we'll lose people real quickly on that. Thank you so much for being on this with us. This has been so fun and so informative. I think I don't know if people, how can they not get your personality out of this call? So if you feel like Madeline's a fit based on this, like, I really hope that you go chat with her because she's great. So thank you for being on here with us.
Thank you both. I really appreciate this time in this space today. This was just so much fun.
Good. I'm glad. Well,
And
thanks you.
all of your links will be in the show notes.
Oh yeah, we'll post everything that you want down in the bottom, including that new workbook she's going to publish for all you guys out there.
Beauty. Thank you. Thank you.
Just kidding. All right, well, we'll see you guys next time.